is there any archaeological evidence anywhere that supports anything dealing with Atlantis or an ancient civilization,
Sure.
but specifically Atlantis?
That's a great question. And, that's a chapter of the book where, I would argue that the Great Pyramid itself, I would agree actually with what Casey said. Casey said that was built from 10,490 to 10,390 BC. That's the exact date Casey gives. And it's interesting because, again, I'm not sure Casey was versed on the, Egyptian mythology, Turin Papyrus. And when somebody asked him, well, who built it? He said, well, there was an advisor, and then there was the architect. He said there was a man named Ra, and then there was another man named Hermes who built it. And of course, Hermes is Thoth. And it's like, that's what the Egyptians anecdotally say, that Thoth built the damn pyramid in the time after the reign of the demigods. And it's like, okay. And he ruled the land to the west, And as Robert Bauval discovered, those three pyramids are aligned to the constellation Orion, not today, but around the year 10,450. And it's like, he didn't discover that in 1932. He discovered that in 1980. So how did a man, again, Sunday school teacher sitting on a couch, know that Thoth built the pyramids in 10,390 BC? They were completed. How did he know that? I think because he's channeling some lived reality. So I would say the Great Pyramid is a standing megalithic example of Atlantean architecture.
How about Mesoamerica? When did that happen?
Yeah, that's interesting because Casey says that after the second destruction in 28,000 BC, when they overtuned the Firestone crystal and blew up all the substations. So again, another misuse of technology. He says that they started migrations after the second one to the Yucatan. And he said those people eventually became the Maya.
The Aztecs, the Maya, and then there was, of course, in Peru,
got the Inca.
The Inca, yeah, the Incas.
Yeah, and
the Olmecs.
Let's not even and the Olmecs, right? And in case he even talks about this, I quote this very long, like 3-page transcript, just verbatim, in the book, where somebody asked him. So somebody had the sense to say, we need to get him in a room and ask him very detailed questions, specifically about Atlantis. So they told him in Waking Life, hey, we're going to do like an intense only Atlantis in Mesoamerica session. And thank God that was saved, because it's incredible, because he describes how going back even 25,000 BC, that region, where I live now, but particularly towards the Yucatan, had always been a mixture. He's like, it was a mixture of people from Lemuria. It was a mixture of people from Africa. It was a mixture of people from what he calls like the Norwegian lands. It was a mixture of people from Palestine. It was, whatever that was then. And he says it was always a mixture. And he says that's why you're going to find things that look like, Hebrew, like a Star of David, at the Temple of Uxmal, pre-Columbian. You're going to see things that look Egyptian. You're going to see things that look, like they found evidence that there's a connection between pottery in Japan and China and Mesoamerica. And it's like, well, how the hell did they do that? Well, it would have been easier if they had this technology, or there was a giant landmass, 5-6 times the size of Australia, where you could sail, because I want to make it clear that it was basically the same world we live in today. Like, we have rockets that can land, but then we have people in the Amazon in canoes. It's not like everybody has access to the highest technology. And correct. Casey and Oliver said that, because when he's flying to India on his cigar-shaped veil, he's like, we're passing over like an island with barbaric people. We're passing over a jungle where the people are looking at us like we're aliens, and he's like, we're just Atlanteans. We are the pride of technology in the ancient world, and then when he gets to India, the culture's advanced but different. He's like, it looks simple, but he's like, these people could kill you with a thought, and they don't need farms because they could just manifest food, so it was like concurrent high, like one went mental, one went material,
Right.
you
Right.
know? So it
Which
wasn't
makes
just like,
but
it
that's the
makes
way we are
sense.
right now. But right now,
Exactly.
The West is still material,
Exactly.
and the East is still more mental, more spiritual, more inward bound.
Right.
And then, but there has been a cross pollination between the two, where now
Just like
India,
back then.
yeah, India has now it's becoming more material. It's technology, and it's growing as a continent. But when like Yogananda came over in the early 1900s and started talking
Mm,
about yoga and meditation and
right.
ascended masters and stuff like that, people were like, what is this?
Right.
But that was the seeds that spawned to where we are today. So there's many others as well that did that. So and that's another thing, because a lot of people think that when you hear the story of Atlantis, it's just like the entire world was Atlantis. Like, no, like you
No.
said, there were multiple cultures at
Yeah.
various stages of development and evolution throughout the
Right.
world, just like it is today.
I mean, it's astounding because it must have seemed like a strange story to people living in the 30s, you
Mhm.
know, and
Oh my God.
maybe that's
It's
why
H.G. Wells. It's H.G. Wells.
it's H.G. Wells, you
Yeah.
know. But today, I think it's like finally time, and maybe that's just why the book, you know, took form in my mind after seeing that, you know, flying the rocket landing or something. I was like, okay, people could stomach some of these technological discoveries.
To watch the full video, click on the link below, and don't forget to subscribe.